Now we're going to look at how to write our very own function. So we're going to start by the same way that we started when we wanted to write a script. We're going to go and get a new tab here, right, in which to write our function. We're going to write our function in the same editor window. The way that we start a function is we use the keyword function to let MATLAB know, hey, this is going to be a function. Then the next thing we provide is actually the return value of the function. And so this is going to be the name of the variable in which we're going to store the value that we're returning. And we'll see a little bit more about our options here in terms of what to return and how many things to return as we learn more about functions. But for now, all of our first functions, we'll assume there's going to be one return value from the function. And so what I'm going to return here is area pi. Then I have the name of my function, an equal sign, and then the name of my function. So I'm going to name my function calc pi area. Then I provide parentheses, and inside the parentheses I give any parameters or arguments that this function would take. So I'm going to say that this function takes in one argument, and it's going to be the radius of my pi. Right? So again, that means that's a value that I'm going to have to give to my function when I call it. Right? I'll take the value that's passed into me, I'll use it to calculate the area of the pi, and then I'll return that final value back to where the function was called from. So there's our function. Then I can do the work of the function. So I'm going to say area pi equals pi times radius pi squared. Okay. So again, I'm using this argument that was passed in my calculation. I need to know what the radius is in order to be able to do the work of this function. I'm storing the result of this into the area pi variable because that's what I'm going to return from my function. Actually, that's really the only expression I need in my function. So when I'm finished, I type the word and. So my function is everything between the function keyword up here at the beginning and where I type end. So this is my very first MATLAB function. I'm going to save it. And so you'll notice that here the name of my file is filled in for me, calc pi area. The name of my file when I have a function has to exactly match the name that I gave my function. I named my function calc pi area, so my file needs to be named calcpiarea.m. So I'm going to go ahead and save. There we go. That's my first function. Now I want to call my function. So remember, my function is expecting me to pass in the radius as an argument in a function call. So I need to have a variable that contains my radius value. So I'll go ahead and I'll make a variable. Now what I want to do is I want to call my calcpiarea function and pass in the value that I want it to use for the radius. And then what I get back, right, is whatever it computed for the area pi. So a really important thing to note here is that what I'm getting is exactly what I would get if I called another function. I'm getting a value back and it's being stored by default into the answer variable. If I look at what's in my local workspace, I only have that radius variable that I created in the answer. I don't have access to the internal variables inside my function. That's because the function is using a separate workspace. So there's one workspace, the base workspace, that's shared between the command window and any scripts that I might have. Each function will have its own separate workspace where it keeps track of its own variables. So really important to kind of understand what variables are able to be accessed from different places in MATLAB.